Well, as we've been reporting, Iran is vowing revenge after U.S. drone strikes in Baghdad killed the country's top general, Qassem Soleimani. Soleimani was behind hundreds of American deaths and was considered a top terrorist by the United States. Thousands of American troops are now being sent to the region. That's in addition to about 700 soldiers who were deployed to Kuwait earlier this week after protesters stormed the U.S. embassy in Baghdad. CBS News foreign correspondent Holly Williams joins us now from Iraq. Holly, what is the latest on the ground?
Well, here in Iraq, the parliament is planning on holding an emergency session, and Iraqi politicians with close ties to Iran are calling for the roughly 5,000 U.S. troops based here in Iraq to be ordered out of the country in protest. That's important because, remember, Iraq is a crucially important counter-terrorism base here in the Middle East for the U.S. Also, the U.S. has ordered another 3,000, roughly 3,000 troops to be deployed to the Middle East. The U.S. is urging American citizens to leave Iraq, clearly in fear of acts of reprisal. And the language coming from Iran is very harsh. They've called the killing of Major General Qassem Soleimani in a U.S. drone strike an act of international terrorism, and they have vowed to take, quote, harsh revenge.
Yeah, you mentioned the revenge that they've vowed to take. Are we seeing any tangible steps, anything that could be a harbinger for things to come?
Not really, but part of what makes this such a dangerous situation is that the Iranians will feel that they have to retaliate. Qassem Soleimani was a national hero, but we cannot know how. And part of the military genius of Qassem Soleimani, however we may judge him morally, was that he understood that Iran cannot combat the US head-on. So he became a master of asymmetrical warfare, giving money and weapons to militia groups and proxies across the Middle East. And those groups could now target U.S. embassies and military facilities in places like Iraq, Syria and Lebanon.
Soleimani, as we know, of course, was an Iranian military commander, but he was killed by the United States on Iraqi soil. Does that dynamic complicate matters?
Yes, it does. The U.S. is vying for influence with Iran here in Iraq. That's one of the main outcomes of the U.S. Invasion and occupation of Iraq. And the fact that Qassem Soleimani was killed by a U.S. drone strike on Iraqi soil, that's viewed as a violation of Iraqi sovereignty by many people here, makes things more difficult for those Iraqi leaders and Iraqi politicians who would like to defend the American military presence here in Iraq.
Now, obviously, Soleimani was powerful and influential among the Iranian ruling class, but what about your average Iranian? Did most people support him? How is the general public responding to his death?
Yeah, he was a revered figure. He apparently came from very humble origins. When he was initially in the military, emerging as a military leader, he was quite a shadowy figure. But in recent years, he's become a very public figure, something of a celebrity, really revered by some in quite a cult-like manner, and a source of national pride for many Iranians.
Obviously well known not just in Iran, but throughout the greater Middle East. How are other countries in the region, the Saudi Arabias, the Israels, how are they reacting to the news of his death?
Well, really very much as you would expect, I think. There's been praise from Israel, no great friend of Iran. They've called President Trump's act in ordering this drone strike a decisive action. Obviously, very harsh rhetoric coming from Iran and threats that they will take revenge. Condemnation from Iraq. And then from other quarters, other countries, just concern that this is a very dangerous escalation of existing tensions between the US and Iran here in the Middle East. For instance, we heard from the Deputy Foreign Minister of France earlier today, who said, we are waking up in a more dangerous world.
Holly Williams in Iraq, thank you and stay safe.